but it's taking a while. Talk among yourselves.
It says live for me.
Okay.
I've got a message that says now streaming live on YouTube.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going.
Talk among yourselves.
Get back.
It says live for me.
Okay.
I've got a message that says streaming live on
Okay,
YouTube.
so we're going. Talk among yourselves.
It says live. It says live. It says live. William, do you have the window open? Mute yourself, William. Mute yourself. Mute yourself. Okay. You have the window open for the stream somewhere, don't you? I think you do. You don't?
William must, because his turned it off.
Exactly.
What just happened?
Aha.
I just muted myself. I have a dog barking in the background. I don't want to scare Paula's cat.
My cats live with a dog. He barks at them all the time when they go near his phone. It doesn't have any effect.
I don't want to scare Paula's cat.
My cats live with a dog. He barks at them all the time.
William, do you have any browser windows open? If you do, you should probably close them. Otherwise, I'm not sure what's going on.
Hasn't ever done that before in Williams.
That seems to have solved the problem.
Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah.
Excellent.
But I wonder why that happened. Well, never mind. So all of that was live on YouTube. That'll drive away the audience.
Branded as like electronica music.
Right. All right. So lesson learned: never have a browser open when you do the YouTube feed. But why would that do that? Well, I don't really know.
It sounded like it was playing somewhere and echoing, and then feedback from
all itself. So it wasn't your computers chiming in. It was just my computer generating all of this incredible noise.
Yeah, it's because it was offset by, because the live isn't precisely live. It's about 2 seconds off.
Right. But I just wouldn't have. I don't know what was recording other than YouTube. So anyway,
better now.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, we're ready to go at 60. We're skipping to 63.1 AD 1125 or so. Got Mona starting.
Is someone gonna I didn't pay any attention to anything this week. Bring us up to date. Did we miss anything? No.
I sent that tiny little paragraph that just kind of, I don't think I left out anything deeply important. Basically, he gets condemned. His book on the Trinity gets condemned. He goes to live at Saint Denis, and I do think this, I'm sorry to have missed this. He can't keep himself from saying that he doesn't think that the Saint Denis that was the apostle to the Gauls was the same Dionysius who's in the book of Acts that Paul meets in Athens. So, and it's all connected with Pseudo Dionysius, who has this book about the Platonic interpretation of Christianity. And so he basically says, look, there's a chronological problem. It can't be Paul's friend because Gaul wasn't converted for a lot longer and stuff like that. But it was really important to the monks of Saint Denis that they were named after Paul's friend, so they got annoyed, and so he had to go live in his little hut, which he built all by himself, and then he got very popular, but then that provoked jealousy. So he now is moving back to, well, not back to, but to Brittany, which of course is where he's from, though this seems he's apparently the Brittany he was from wasn't really that British, wasn't that Celtic, whereas now he's moving to this monastery, which really is in the heart of Brittany, and clearly he's faced with Bretons all around him. Anything else? Anybody want to add anything else?
Also, he was embroiled in all these theological controversies too about the Trinity and
yes.
They burned the book.
And there's this sub argument about he called his little monastery, the one he built in exile, his little retreat, he named it after the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, and this was theologically suspect too for some reason. So he has a long defense of why it's a good thing to name something after the Holy Spirit, but it's a little tedious to read, unless you like that sort of thing.
So this is section 63.1.
Yes.
De abatia ad quam assumptus et persecutioniorum id est monacorum, quam tyranni in eum, concerning the abbey to which he took himself, and the persecutions, or the persecution, as much of the sons, that is of the monks, as of the tyrant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, cum autem tantis perturbationibus incessanter affligerer, atque hoc extremum mihi superesset concilium. Now, at a time when I was being incessantly afflicted by such great disturbances, and this extreme plan or scheme remained to me, ut apud inimicos Christi ad Christum confluerem, that I might take refuge with Christ among the enemies of Christ. Occasionem quandam adeptus, qua insidias istas Paulum declinari me credidi, having obtained or gotten a certain opportunity by which I believed that I might avoid those particular venomous or treacherous attacks. Incidi in Christianos atque monachos gentibus longe severiores atque peiores. Incidi, I fell in with Christians and monks more cruel and worse than the pagans, like by a mile, by far.
Good.
Erat quippe in Britannia minore, in episcopatu Venencensi, abatia quaedam sancti Gildasii Ruensis, pastore defuncto desolata. There was, indeed, in Brittany, in the Diocese of Vannes, a certain abbey of St. Gildas of Ruiz, having been desolata, having been left empty, the abbot having died, or after the abbot had died. Ad quam me concus fratrem electio cum ascensu principis terrae vocavet. Sort of a harmonious selection, or maybe even like-minded choice of the brothers, along with the approval of the principes of the Lord, or whatever his station was, the Lord of that land or that region maybe, summoned me to that abbey.
Good.
Atque hoc abate nostro et fratibus facile impetravit, and accomplished this easily through my abbot and the brothers. I guess the election, is that what he's talking about? I mean, the harmonious selection or the like-minded choice accomplished this easily.
Right.
It just sounded funny as the agent doing it.
Right. Well, I guess the agreement of the monks got what they wanted from his abbot back in France and from his fellow back in France. Good. One very pedestrian point is just that Pastore defuncto desolata is a great example of why you end up just kind of shrugging your shoulders about what kind of an ablative it is sometimes, right? It could be ablative of means, translated left behind by. No, Jen, you're looking.
Well, if you really mean left behind, like by, like that, you need a preposition.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
People.
All right. So it has to be an ablative absolute. All right.
You can talk about what kind of ablative absolute. Is it a causal ablative absolute, like since he died, or is it a circumstantial when he died?
I don't really want to talk about that. But sure. But it could also be an ablative attendant circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because in a way, all ablative absolutes are ablatives of attendant circumstance. And I guess, well, not about vice versa. Vice versa? I don't know. Anyway, any other thoughts? Anyone have anything more profound than that? It's pretty, how's that for setting the bar low, right? Insight.
I liked the pictures that Mona sent out. Pretty good.
Very nice. I think we should all have our meeting should be in Brittany.
Absolutely. That area is gorgeous.
All right, onward. Brian, you ready?
Yes. All right. So, sique me francorum invidia ad occidentem sicut Romium Romanorum expolit ad orientem. And Franks drove me to the west, just as a hostility of the Romans drove Jerome to the east.
Right. I think somehow the computer swallowed the subject. Invidia, the hatred of the Franks in this way drove me, right? Oh, he's frozen.
In time.
That's so spooky. I don't know what to do.
I think he's having connectivity problems.
Yes. Jen, why don't you just take over and we'll see if he unfreezes? This is so weird.
Okay. I'll admit I didn't relook at this, so.
Okay.
But I did have professional development all day, so 9 hours.
You're ready to go.
Oh yeah. Num quam enim hic rei, fiat Deus, ac quia vissem. For I never would have assented to this thing God should know. Ut quocunquam modo has, quas incessanter sustenebam oppressiones, ut dixi declinaram. If it weren't in order to turn aside these oppressions in some way or other, the ones which I was sustaining, withstanding, undergoing constantly, as I said, ut dixi.
Good.
Terra quipe barbara et terrae lingua mihi incognita erat. Since the land was barbarous and their language, the language of the land, was unknown to me, et turpus atque indomabilis illorum monacorum vita omnibus fere notissima, and the lifestyle of the monks was shameful, and of those monks was shameful and not able to be controlled. The life that's really well known to almost everybody.
Sorry, Jen, could you say that again? The life what?
Omnibus fere notissima, very well known to almost everyone.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Et gens terrae Ilius inhumana atque incomposita, and the people of that land are inhumane, uncivilized, and incomposita, not well ordered.
Sloppy.
You know, isn't a very nice thing to say about the place you come from, poor Abelard. Sicut ergo ille, qui imminente sibi gladio per territus in praecipitum se collidit. Therefore, like that person who, when a sword is threatening him, terrified, crushes himself into a fall from a great height, et ut puncto temporis mortem unam differat, aliam incurrit, and he runs into another death that differs by a point of time, or that puts off by just a second of time one death. So that was terribly confusing. And in order to put off one death by a moment of time, he runs into another death, namely the sword, and now he's crushed himself on the ground. Sic ego ab uno periculo in aliud scienter me contuli. Thus I knowingly scienter betook myself from one danger into another.
Yes. Good.
Ibique ad horizoni undas oceani. Oceani? Is that long or short? Oceani.
Oceani? I don't know.
I don't know.
The A of Oceanus?
Yeah, is it long or short?
I don't know. We're looking
Cum fugam mihi ulterius terrae posturemitas non praeberet, saepe in orationis meis illud revobam, etc. And there, to the waves of the rough-sounding ocean, when the farness, postremitas, of that land beyond was not offering escape for me, which again, I'm sorry, was not well phrased. Often I was turning the following over in my prayers. Finibus terrae ad te clamavi dum anxia retor cor meum. From the ends of the earth, I have called to you while my heart is made to feel anxious.
Yes, good. Troubled.
Oceanus is a long O, at least there.
Yes, long O, and everything else is short.
Short.
Short A, so oceani.
Yes,
Okay.
and I assume that those two C's, I'll have to check that medieval or just a misprint on my part. Normally, of course, it's just got one.
It could be telling you it was a long O.
Oh yeah, no, it's got two C's in this.
Yeah, but the two C's could be like a orthographic for the fact the O is long.
Maybe. Or maybe they just said that.
I don't know.
On a more pedestrian note, or an equally pedestrian note, that quippe, I just want to point out in sentence 3, that terra quippe is very hard to translate. It means something like, again, forsooth. So it does work as a transitional word. So you could say, and in fact, but it functions in a number of different ways. Just indeed, the land was barbarous, and the tongue was. I didn't know the language, and people immediately, that one of the first things they talk about in biographies of Abelard is from this passage. They assume that even though he grew up in Brittany, that he didn't speak Breton, and perhaps, and I think they think his family was not actually Celtic or Breton, but French. And does anyone know where that story of is it based on a tale or a legend or a fable? It feels like when he's talking about the person running from the sword and then jumping off the cliff, that sounds like it ought to be a well-known story, but no one seems to cite it, and I certainly don't know anything. I don't know a similar story. Does anyone?
Maybe it's just, I don't know, his own idea.
Right, maybe he just imagined it.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, you're back. Brian, are you back?
Yeah, but my video's been rather, my internet's been very erratic this evening. So
Sorry.
it sounds like you've moved forward anyway.
Okay. Does anyone want to volunteer for section?
Can I ask one little question? The third line from the bottom, scienter. I think knowingly is a great literal translation. I'm just intrigued. In English, my friends and I talk about how people are verbing nouns. Do you know what I mean? So that like table used to be a noun, but now you can table at a fair.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that scienter is, I guess, the adverbial form of the participle, which is a verbal adjective. Is that common anywhere else? Adverbing verbs?
I
hadn't seen it before, but I don't know. Jen, is it something you've run across?
There's a name for that, which maybe William, you remember, where you change the part of speech of a word and like make a word verbing nouns. Like there's a name for that.
Okay.
It's a fairly common classical word.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't think of any others. Are there any others like that?
It gets an inch in the Oxford Latin Dictionary, so that gives you some idea of how common it is.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And I didn't think twice about it because it's so obvious that what
it translates so smoothly into English. It's great.
Yeah. But I think, the Romans are pretty free with creating adverbs, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
No?
I don't know. It depends. They make adverbs, but I think it depends. What time period you're talking about, what kinds of adverbs they make. Because certain forms definitely are productive at certain periods of the history of Latin and then aren't productive later. So you don't make new adverbs in O, but you can make new adverbs in ter, or you can make new adverbs in A, but there's a lot. It's definitely something that changes over time what kind of adverbs you can make.
So maybe that's why it struck me, because what I've done before has been pretty narrowly classical Latin. So
well, and so, but other than that, scienter seemed fine to me.
Oh yeah.
But you definitely couldn't decide that you were going to say a
monter to mean lovingly.
I don't know. That sounds okay.
Okay.
That sounds like one I might have seen.
It sounds great. I don't know.
Yeah. Diligenter.
Right.
Oh, I never even thought of that as being from a verb. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've obviously thought more. Jen has obviously thought way more about the history of adverbs than I have.
Well, I know that Plautine adverbs, are some of them are still it's still being formed and it changes later. It's you see it too, the kinds. I know there's some that the kind of suffix changes over time, but Do I have any great examples off the top of my head? No.
Amonter is classical.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Anybody want to volunteer for 64.1? Jen? Jen?
I feel bad making Jen go twice.
It's fine.
I can do it.
Sorry, who said the other?
I can do it.
All right. I can't hear who's talking when they say I can do it.
Oh,
Mona?
I did. I
Oh,
said
Mona,
it, if nobody else.
Mona, why don't you do it?
Okay. So 64.1.
Mm-hmm.
Quanta enim ansietate etiam quam regendum susceperam. With what anguish also that, oops, I should have read more of it, I guess. Susceperam indisciplinata fratrum congregatio, cor meum die ac nocte cruciaret. With what anguish or anxiety also that undisciplined community, fratrum of brothers, which I had undertaken to be directed, tormented, cruciaret, tormented my heart by day and by night, like all the time. Cum tam animae meae, quam corporis pericula pensarem, neminem in iam latere arbitro, while I thought about or pondered the dangers as much of the soul as of the body.
Good.
Certum quipe habebam quod si eos.
Did you do the name and iam latere arbitrar?
I lost my place. Quanta inum cum tam anime ne quam corporis greatly while I pondered the dangers as much of the souls of the body. I think now to be hidden neminem iam laterti arbitrar. I think
Right.
now to be hidden from nobody.
Right. Good.
Certum quipe habebam quod si eos ad regularem vitam quam professi fuerant compellare temptarem me vivere non posse. Indeed, cum certum I habebam certum I thought it or considered it certain.
Good.
That if I would attempt to drive them from the regular life, or compel them, I'm sorry, not drive them from it, compel them to the regular life,
right.
Which they had professed, I wouldn't be able to live, like they probably killed. Et si hoc in quantum possum non agrem me damnandum esse. And if I would not do this thing in quantum possum insofar as I was able, in other words, drive them to live right.
Good.
That like I ought to be damned, or
yes.
like I would die.
Right.
He's caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yes. Very good.
I have a quick question. Is ad regularem vitam, is regularem vitam, doesn't that mean like the lifestyle of the monks? Is that a, what's the word? Like a religious?
Right. I assume so. I assume it's a technical kind of medieval term, the life of the rule, right?
Mm-hmm. Regular, yeah, they call them regular monks.
This one's very scratchy.
Yeah, the regular life is the monastic life because you're following a rule, a regulus, and that is often referred to as a vita, a way. Like, when they're talking about Eastern religion, the way of the Buddha.
Well, that'd be a Wea.
Right.
A Wea and a Weta.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Good. All right. I still can't figure out who's. It's not me making all that noise, is it?
Then it stopped.
Well, I just muted myself. Is it back?
I don't know.
Let me try muting myself again.
Might be me if it's just from time to time. I'll try to be more careful.
Might be. Yeah, I'm not sure where it's from.
It's hard to know. I thought, yeah, anyway. But we seem to have a moment's peace. Great. Victoria, 64.2.
Ipsam etiam abbatiam tyrannis quidem in terra illa potentissimus, ita iam deus sibi subjugaverat. Also, that monastery, that abbey, a certain tyrant or landowner now for a long time had subjugated that abbey also in a landowner who was very powerful in that land. Was that messy enough, or should I try it one more time?
Good.
Ex ordinatione scilicet ipsius monasterii nactus occasionem, ut omnia loca monasterio adiacentia in usus proprios redigisset. And seizing the favorable moment from the disarray or disorder, scilicet, it's well known, or certainly seizing that, seizing a favorable occasion from that disorder of that monastery, he turned so that every location adjacent to the monastery turned back or was reduced into his personal use, usus proprios.
Yes, but it's active, right? He had reduced all the things adjacent to the monastery, all the places adjacent to the monastery. He had reduced it to his own uses.
Okay. At gravioribus exactionibus monachos ipsos quam tributarios Judeos exagitaret. And he harassed those monks with graver tributes, with graver penalties than the Jewish taxpayers.
Yes, good. Although notice the ipsos is actually a little more intense than just those monks. The monks themselves, right? Because it's surprising that he's taxing the monks themselves as much as Jews. Do we, since I've interrupted, do we know anything about this Jewish tax? Does anyone know anything about this Jewish? James?
It was customary that the Jews throughout Italy and throughout France, as well as I can remember, they're paying special fees and taxes, right, usually to the potentates of wherever they happen to be.
Okay. Non-Christians were extremely lucrative tax bases, mm-hmm, or tax farms, and local lords fought with helping with the kings or other higher lords over jurisdiction over the non-Christians in the area, especially in Spain, because they could tax them. And if you could, say, protect the Jews and the Muslims in your area, as the Templars did, from double taxation, where you only tax them once and you would represent them in court and protect them from the predations of the king, for example, or rival orders, then you were a desirable lord and they would tend to go with you. And it depended on where you were in Europe. In Northern Europe, Jews were not generally allowed to own property, so they were merchants. But in Spain, they were often, they were more likely to be skilled agricultural workers, usually in orchards and groves. And they actually were richer as communities, although there were certainly poor Jews. And as the oppression continued, those communities became more stratified socially. But there were the Jews as a community were richer than the Muslims as a community. So both were taxed pretty heavily, but the Jews could pay more. And so, for example, they didn't have to usually do military service the way the Muslims did under Christian rule because they could usually pie their way out of it, at least in Spain. I know it's different in other parts of Europe.
Okay, but that's great. So this is clearly an example of the local lord taxing them.
Yeah.
Taxing them
extortionately
as though they were Jews. I mean, or instead
it's also the idea of a head tax is exactly the point that you raised, William. He calls them, they're actually taxing the monks themselves individually. And that's not something that even, head taxes were not that common. They certainly weren't a regular part at this point in time of the way that you'd be living, let's say, in the lands where these monks were. So it's pretty extreme.
Well, the Lord should be taxing the church. That's a no-no. That's a conflict between local secular, and it happened all the time. But I mean, it's a conflict between local secular power and church power. And if a local lord pushed it too far and the church had enough power in that area, he could end up excommunicated.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And shortly, it's going to seem as if the individual monks have resources that the monastery as a whole doesn't, even if they are being subject to a head tax.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry to interrupt, Victoria.
So,
keep going.
Urgebant me monachi pro necessitudinibus quotidianis, cum nihil in commune haberant, cum nihil in commune, I guess because it was taxed away, quad eis ministrarem, sed unas quisque de propriis olim marsupiis, se et concubinas suas cum filiis vel filiabus sostinaret. So the monks urged me, begged me concerning their daily necessities, while they held nothing in common, that I might minister to them, or that I might distribute to them. But unis quisque, each one, every single one of them, from their formerly personal purses, propriis olim marsupies, sustained themselves, their concubines with the sons or with their sons and daughters.
Good.
Gracious. Gaudebant me super hoc anxiare et ipse quoque furabantur et asportabant que poterant. My Castle's dictionary does not have that verb that anxiare comes from, although I think it's the same one that in 63.2 it had anxiaretur. So they rejoiced. I'm taking that as an infinitive, that I was anguished, exercised, anxious about this. They rejoiced that I was anxious about this.
Yes.
And they themselves also stole and carried off whatever they could, whatever they were able. So, ut cum in administratione ista deficerem compellerer aut ad disciplinas cessare aut omnino recedere. So that when I fell short or was deficient in that administration, I would be compelled either to cease from discipline or wholly to withdraw.
Right. Good. Either he had to leave, either he had to stay there and not discipline them, or he had to quit being the abbot.
This is a great image of like a crazy monastery out of control. That they're robbing him of the things that he would have to use to give them so that he could no longer discipline them. It's just great.
Great. I mean, I assume this is why they needed, I'm about to say this word I've never said before in my whole life, the Cluniac reform.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It kind of reached a lot of places, but I guess Brittany's pretty far out there.
Yeah, right. On a more
I was wondering, was this normative that monks would have concubines and families?
Yes. Yes.
They weren't supposed to.
It was common enough. Well, actually, it was iffy until Gregory VII, which was only a few decades before this. And up to that point, it was actually very common.
Mm-hmm.
And it remained common in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It's one of the things that they broke over.
Mm-hmm.
That the two churches broke away from each other over. Not monastic. Monks weren't supposed to. They were supposed to take a triple vow. But priests could certainly have families. And there were all sorts of shenanigans that people got up to in monasteries. And a lot of these places were fairly isolated.
Right.
And it could get pretty crazy. There's a great book. It's called Furta Sacra that talks about these similar shenanigans. It's about the movement, shall we say, of saints' relics.
Yeah.
And he deals in this period and later especially. And it was not uncommon for monks who wanted to start their own pilgrimage site to steal from a famous pilgrimage site. And it was believed that if the saint wanted to be taken, the saint would allow himself to be stolen or herself. Right. And so if they got away with it, they were right.
Okay.
It's a really cool book.
Yeah. It's by Patrick Geary, Geary.
Oh, you've heard of it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure. It's a fun book.
I was going to say something more Abelard's focus. Wait a minute. I've got it's driven out of my head. Oh, yes. Such small knowledge as I have is I do remember reading in one of the books basically the same point that Jameson made, which is that part of the disorder of the monastery is the remoteness in Brittany and the lack of control, the lack of church control, the lack of the Cluniac reform, if I'm remembering that right. But that I wouldn't stick to that. Further thoughts? 65 or 65.1? Any volunteers?
I think I signed for that.
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Oh, of course. It says Greg, not open. Right. Okay. I read my own writing. Greg, take it away.
Okay. Cum autem tota terri ilius barbarias pariter exlex and disciplinata esset. Nulli erant hominum ad quorum confugere possum adjutorium. Cum amoribus omnibus pariter desiderem. As the whole of that land was equally barbarous, lawless, and undisciplined, there was no man to whose aid I could flee.
Good.
As I was equally set apart from all of their manners. Foris me tyrannos ille et satellites sui assiduae opprimebant. Intus mi fratres incessanter insidiabantur, ut illud apostoli in me specialiter dictum res ipsa indicaret. Foris pugnae intus timores. outside of me, that tyrant and his accomplices oppressed assiduously.
Just before you go on, notice that May is the object of opprimeban, right? Outside, the tyrant and his satellites were oppressing me.
Yes.
Good.
Within, the brothers incessantly laid traps. Within,
right,
the brothers incessantly laid traps for me.
Yes.
Ut illud, so that saying of the apostle was especially manifest in me. Fighting outside, fear within. Fight outside, fears within.
Yes. So, very good. The word order of that last part seems to be very strange. The ut illud, so that thing of the apostle against me, I guess it's not that strange, specially seems to have been said, the fact itself shows, right? The fact itself was showing that thing, that thing was said, we would say, by the apostle about me, again, literally in me, against me. Now somebody's hammering.
Sorry, that's my husband.
All right, make him stop or I'm going to mute you. I'm going to mute you. If Keith wants to hammer, Keith is going to hammer.
Oh, can I ask one question?
Sure.
At the beginning there, tota terrae ilius. Why is tota suddenly used? I mean, I guess that's a partitive genitive, terrae ilius, but I would have.
The whole of that land.
I think it's actually the tota barbaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The entire sort of barbaric people of that land.
Mm-hmm.
Britain could not have been this bad.
Right.
In general, it couldn't have been this bad.
I don't know.
Thank you.
All right, good. Onward, Greg, 65.2.
Considerabam et plangebam, quam inutilam et miseram vitam duceram, et quam infructuose tam mihi quam aliis vixeram, et quantum antia clericis proficissem, et quod nunc eis propter monachos dimissus, nec in ipsa nec in monachus aliquem fructum haberum, et quem in efficax in omnibus inceptis atque conatibus meis rederer, ut iam mihi de omnibus illud improperari rectissime deberet, ec homo cepit edificare, ut non potuit consumare. I considered and complained how useless and miserable a life I would lead, and how fruitless, as much to myself as to others, I would live, and how I had previously profited the clerics, how much I'd done for the clerics before, and that now them having dismissed me implied on account of the monks.
Mm-hmm.
Neither in the cleric, in them, in the clerics, nor in the monks would I have any fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And how ineffective in everything begun and attempted I would basically how ineffective I would be, although it's not tracing the Latin grammar. And I find all of this fruitlessness interesting in light of what he'd suffered in Paris.
Mm.
Well, but he was such a successful teacher. And now he's not. So did we get and how ineffectual in all beginnings and attempts I had been restored to my attempts, my efforts. No,
just rendered.
I had been, and how ineffectual I had been rendered in all my attempts and efforts.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to? You need to finish ut iam mihi?
Ut iam mihi de omnibus illud improperare rectissime deberet. Hic homo cepit edificare et non potuit consumare. And already
I think it's so that now I should write. I rightly needed to be
blamed
in regard to this thing by everybody.
This man began to build and wasn't able to finish.
Right, right. Everyone was saying that. Right, he couldn't finish what he started. I think that's clear.
Sorry, can you do the ut clause again? I don't understand. What's the subject of deberet, or is it just impersonal?
I think is it illid, or that thing would
right
to be sort of thrown in my face.
Exactly, and the illid points forward to the quotation.
Okay.
Good, Greg. Okay. Any thoughts? Is anyone feeling sorry for Abelard yet?
Never.
Come on, just because he was arrogant.
I found myself thinking of George Lakoff, the cognitive scientist who wrote the book called Don't Think of an Elephant. He wrote it for progressive people of progressive political persuasion. And one of the points he makes is that, you know, you try to deal with the right wing by showing them facts. That doesn't work because they're dealing with frames that are sort of ingrained in people, and they appeal to these frames, and your appeal to facts doesn't matter because the facts don't fit the frames. It's a very interesting book. And Lakoff has quite a career consulting for progressives. And I found myself looking at Abelard, showing the monks the book, see where it says Augustine said this, or St. Denis really wasn't, you know, when they have an ingrained frame, they can't tolerate that. The facts don't matter, they can't be processed.
Well, it's also, I mean, you got this guy from Paris coming in, he's going to ruin your entire franchise, your entire St. Denis situation. Going to throw it all to disarray, really for no reason whatsoever, just to make himself feel better.
Well, and because he was reading the text and he didn't think that he couldn't keep from saying that he didn't think it was the same Denis, right? It's just, I have a colleague who just, I mean, when he knows something, he cannot not say it, right? I've seen him, he was running for political office and he just couldn't not say the things that his constituents didn't want to hear, but he knew it was true, so he's going to say it. Anyhow, it was a very short, it ended with school board. Okay, we've got here, this is open. 6, we need a volunteer. Wait, I've got a chat comment. Someone has a comment, hold it.
Oh, Ace Demissis.
Can you explain Ace Demissis?
Oh, yeah. Back in the second line of 65.2.
Well, can you? I can't. Wait a minute, I haven't found it.
Ablative absolute.
Yeah.
them having dismissed or banished me, or
Oh,
It's
I
not,
do-
it's not active.
so yes, it's an ablative absolute, and what it means is that the students got dismissed because of the monks, right? Back when he was teaching in the wilderness.
Which Mona actually just put the translation in. That's perfect.
Right. Good. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Irene.
On a tiny little point just before we move on, since we stopped, all those subjunctives, they're all in indirect questions after pangebam. And when you have an indirect question, you don't need to translate it subjunctively. So it's literally just, I was complaining about how useless and miserable a life I was leading. It's not, so in English, we don't use the subjunctive or conditional there at all. Like we just say, I complained about what a miserable life I was leading.
Right.
That's why all of those are subjunctive all the way up through the ut clause at the end.
Right. So actually, the weird thing is you can get away with saying would, which is why I kind of left Greg alone, because of course that's one way of saying the imperfect, right? So I would walk down the street and then I would buy a candy bar and then I would tell my mother, I don't know where that story is going. But you see what I mean? So it is ambiguous, but you're right, I think, Jen, to stress that it's really just a straightforward indirect question. I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, who wants to volunteer class? Don't make me call on somebody. Oh my God. I could do it and embarrass myself. Jen, why don't you do it? And
I'll do it.
You're
I guess why don't I take it? I feel like I haven't actually translated it in Latin all summer so far.
Well, good then. This would be a great moment for you.
This would be a great moment. I will try my best to make this sound classical. All right. So desperabam penitus cum recordare quae fugurem et considerarem quae incurrerem. Et priores molestias quasi jam nullas reputans, crebro apud me ingemiscens, dicebam merito hec patior, qui Pericletum ides consulatorem deserens, in desolationem certam me intrusi, et minas evitare cupiens ad certa confugi pericula. So I was sort of despairing deep down when I recalled the things that I had fled and considered the things that I had sort of run into, and thinking now that these former annoyances were almost nothing, I was saying, often complaining by myself, I guess no one was listening, I suffered these things rightly. I who, deserting the Paraclete, that is my consoler, drove myself into certain desolation, and desiring to evade threats, I who fled towards certain dangers.
I think you were right the first time, weren't you? And desiring to escape threats, I have now escaped to certain dangers.
Yeah, but is it still, oh, you think that we've fallen out of the qui clause? So I thought that it was pat patior, so I suffered these things rightly, I who drove myself into certain desolation and who fled towards certain dangers. What do you think? Are they both in the qui clause? It's hard to tell.
I think they are.
I thought so, right.
I think they're both in the qui clause.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Should I keep going? Did I bring the episode? Okay.
Well, before we go on, and since I've stopped you anyway, the fugurem and incurrerem are actually imperfects. Yeah. And so even though I see the temptation to pluperfects, actually what he's saying is I was escaping and I was considering the dangers which I was incurring. I mean,
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
it's the first of them that's surprising. But he's obviously considering it as an ongoing escaping situation and an ongoing running into trouble situation.
Yeah, that's true. I guess he can go back, right? So,
right,
it is an ongoing fleeing situation.
Right.
All right. So,
Can I ask something before we go on? I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do, William. Somebody asked on the Latin teacher Facebook group today. They were reading something. They didn't say what. Where they that it was something later though, they said later Latin, that has this word order, the preposition, adjective, verb, noun that went back with the preposition. And they said, that they thought this was a really weird word order and they hadn't seen it in classical Latin. Does it occur in classical Latin? And I didn't have a good answer off the top of my head. Abelard does it all the time. Mm-hmm. Is that classical, that word order?
Say again what it is.
The very end of that sentence, the ad certa confugi pericola, I fled for refuge to the certain dangers. Mm-hmm. So putting the verb, embedding that into the prepositional phrase. In poetry it is, but are there prose authors?
I'm tempted to say, I'm kind of assuming Tacitus can do it. I've been sort of swamped with him lately. So it didn't, on the one hand, I recognize that it makes it hard to translate, but I didn't see it as particularly unclassical or strange. After all, he just wants to emphasize the word pericola, right? Because that's for emphasis. You can just move it there. So there's nothing unclassical about it.
Because I couldn't think off the top of my head, but it sounded Silver Latin to me.
Right. Well, that
it didn't sound Ciceronian.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm happy to. So, kind of all agree.
Tacitus would be the place to look.
Certainly,
see if I can find one there.
I'll look.
Okay.
Okay. Take care. All right. Where are we?
Illud.
Illud. Okay. Keep going.
Illud autem plurium me crucibat. Quad oratorio nostro demisso de divini celebratione officii ita ut oporteret providere non poteram, quoniam loci nimia paupertas, vix unius hominis necessitudini supplicaret. Okay, that sort of fact was, moreover, that fact was sort of torturing me greatly. The fact that since our sort of oratory had been left behind, I was not able to provide concerning the celebration of divine office to the extent that would have sufficed. Would suffice. And I don't know what the loci is here. Is this Brittany? The excessive poverty of the place scarcely sufficed for the needs of a single man. So it's Brittany then.
Or the area around the Paraclete. He's worried about his oratory of the Paraclete. But you're right, I don't know whether he doesn't have any money in Brittany to send to the Paraclete, or the area around the Paraclete isn't good for supporting the people there.
I don't know.
I don't either.
Doesn't something bigger end up getting put there? The Paraclete wasn't that bad, was it?
Right, and it wasn't that off in the distance, but
I think the troubles were in Brittany, and he was not able to bring that monastery up to snuff, and that might have been causing problems for him not being able to send the Paraclete.
Right, that would make sense.
Oh, because he could barely afford to keep the monks from killing him.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sed ipse quoque verus Paracletus, mihi maxime super hoc desolato, veram attulit consolationem, et proprio proedebibat providit oratorio. But that true Paraclete also sort of brought sort of true consolation to me, made very sad concerning this thing, and provided for its own oratory insofar, just as was appropriate.
Yes. Nice gender neutral use of for translating its own, right? Its own, his own, is the Holy Spirit. What gender is the Holy Spirit? There's a question for you. Paraclete is obviously masculine. Anyhow.
So is Spiritus Sanctus. So
that's true, right?
Actually, that's a very, especially in this period of time we're talking about, the gender of the Holy Spirit is not entirely out of bounds, because this is when Marian worship is becoming very prevalent, and Mary becomes almost as important a figure, or as important a figure to some people who are not really up on the church, as the Trinity.
All right, I'm not going to touch that one.
Marian worship, the Marian cult is very interesting. I'm amazed that more of it was not declared heretical during that period.
Right.
She's kind of like, she becomes the fourth person of the Trinity, almost. Yeah.
Yeah. She's the human, compassionate part that loves us and forgives us even when we screw up. and there are a lot of stories about that.
Let's try not
very devoted to her.
All right. Good. 67, Paula. Thank you, Jameson, by the way.
I had to at some point.
Wait, Paula.
Oh, Paul, you're muted.
You're muted. Sorry, Paula, you were muted. Do you want to?
Sorry.
Are you going to translate?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I was talking and nobody heard me.
No. It's so off in the way.
That's so sad. Okay. Accidit namque ut abbas noster. Since it happened that our abbot, Sancti Scilicet Dionysii, namely the holy Dionysus. Is that Scilicet meant to be sarcastic?
No, I don't think so. It just really, that just means namely, right?
Okay.
But notice that Sancti Dionysi is genitive, right? The abbot, our abbot, namely we have to say the abbot of Saint Denis.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know why I didn't see that. Of course, he was the abbot of Saint Denis. Predictam elam Argentioli abbatiam, that aforesaid abbot of Argentiolus.
Abbey.
What? Abbey.
Abbatia.
Yes.
Abbey.
Oh, yeah. In qua religionis habitum nostra illa iam in Christo soror potius quam uxor Heloisa suceperat. This was a complicated sentence. In which place of religion our girl Heloise, now a sister in Christ rather than a wife, had already taken the habit.
Perfect, except, at least, I mean, this is debatable. I would argue that religionis goes with habitum, in which that, if you're going to say that girl of ours, namely the one, and you did all that.
Well, I was trying to figure out how to translate Illa.
Right, that female, right,
Yeah.
the woman, Heloise had, right. So all of that's right, but I think, and you're right. Religionis could go with qua, but I think it's much better with habitum religionis, in which she had that place where she had taken on the habit, the garb of religion.
Okay, can it apply to both?
Well, I always think that's, I mean, in poetry, sure, you can have that kind of artistry. I don't think that, I mean, it can apply to both in the sense that you could make a case for both, for each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Abelard is being sort of, he's not like creating would it be a hendiadys or I don't think he's being cute here. I think it's just a question of how you break the sentence up in your head, which is that the age-old problem of Latin, right? You never know. I mean, the Romans needed more punctuation than they ever had, right? So if if you had little things that are short of commas but tell you what words go with what, it would be very helpful, and they just don't. So I would say it's debatable whether religionis goes with qua or with habitum, but I don't think it's like a pun or a double entendre or I don't know. Those aren't the right words. Do you have, is there a word?
You wouldn't call it a henditis. I would say you take it apokoinu.
That's right. Thank you. Apokoinu. Right. Which is Greek for taking it with two different things. But it's a rhetorical device, and I don't think he's being rhetorical here.
Well, he is talking about, well, she's, rather than being a wife, she's...
Oh, sure. I mean, he's being rhetorical all the time, but I just don't see that a particular, well, I don't know. I hadn't really...
Well, I think one solution might be that habitus on its own doesn't really have the meaning of habit at this point in time. I mean...
So what is it? So you mean it needs religionis?
I think it does. I mean, everyone has a habitus. It does have a monastic inflection, but it's not...
Right.
It's way of life, right? Or habit, if you're thinking about the sort of clothing aspect of it, I suppose it could mean that as well with religionis.
But anyway, it's one of those things you can't really pontificate about. Well, you can pontificate, but you can't pontificate authoritatively about. You can just have a feeling. So keep going. I mean, you did all of that sister rather than wife Eloise very nicely.
Okay, well, thanks. Tanquam ad ius monasterii sui antiquitus pertinentem quocunque modo acquireret. Just as to the ancient law of her monastery pertaining, somehow or other he obtained.
But it's still back to abbas. Yeah, and it's predictam abbatiam is the subject.
Yeah?
Sorry, object.
Yeah, he's the subject, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Et conventum inde sanctimonialium, and the pious convent thence, ubi illa comes nostra prioratum habebat, where she, our companion, had the priorship. Violenter expelleret, he violently expelled.
Right.
The conventum, yeah.
What?
He violently expelled this.
Yeah.
Right.
Her and her sisters, yeah.
It's an easy way to ruin a nunnery that you've just acquired.
The conventum, yeah.
Kick them all out.
Yeah.
Well, the abbot Sujet was not a nice person, shall we say.
Really?
I generally use stronger language regarding him, but I won't.
Okay.
He was not a nice guy. He had a lot of issues. And this is do you remember the book A Distant Mirror?
Barbara Tuchman?
Yeah. This is that part of the area of France.
Okay.
Or it's fairly nearby. And it's kind of when he's talking about how it's kind of lawless and crazy, Abelard is, he's not that far off the mark. Sorry?
No, sorry, keep going.
Que cum diversis locis exules dispergerentur, that when to different places the exiles were scattered, oblatam mihi a domino intellexi occasionem. Exposed me by the Lord, I perceived the opportunity.
Yeah, I perceived an opportunity, oblatam mihi, brought to me by the Lord.
Yes, yeah. I was just trying to keep the word order.
Right. The word there, yeah, but if you do that, insanity will ensue because
Okay, I won't.
Abelard's word order is really weird.
Yes, he's receiving the opportunity that the Lord exposed to him.
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. Qua nostro consularem oratorio. By which I deliberated on our oratory. I can figure out oratorio.
I think the
He's
trick
saying
is
it's oratory.
it's his oratory. It's his little paraclete that he built that he's worried about not being able to provide for. And now there's all these what you might call loose nuns, right, who've been set free. And so that's a solution. I think the trick is consulo means to take thought for or to provide for, right? So because there are these nuns have been cut free by Abbot Suger, I realized that the Lord had brought me an opportunity by which I could, what would we say, take care of my oratory or take thought for.
Yeah.
Paula, I just wanted to say you can absolutely translate oblatum the way you did at the end. You can say that was offered. You can take participles and expand them into a clause.
Right.
And in English, we use participles less than Latin, so that's often more English to say, I perceived the opportunity that had been offered. So that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Even the AP exam allows you to do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep the word order. It's weird. I think I'm starting to get into Abelard's grammar head, which is not a good thing. Illus taque reversus, thither therefore returned, eam cum quibus dam aliis de eadem congregatione, ipsi adherentibus ad predictum oratorium invitavi. I invited her with some other people from her own congregation and other adherents to the aforesaid oratory.
I would have said I invited her to the aforesaid oratory with some others of the same congregation or same group that were adhering ipsi dative to her. In other words, I invited her with her henchwomen.
Okay.
They weren't committing crimes.
All right. But I wanted to be able to say henchwomen.
Fair enough.
So that you could have said henchwomen and cluniac reforms both in the same session.
It's a big day for me today. Paula, we are taking our eye off the ball.
What?
And we apologize.
I don't know. I guess you could think you guys were drinking too much wine before you started or something.
I know.
I should have started drinking heavier earlier too. Anywho. Where the heck are we? This is a long freaking sentence. Here we go. Eoque illis adductis. And to it, these having been led, ipsum oratorium, to the oratory itself, cum omnibus ei pertinentibus, with all those pertaining to her, or her henchwomen. So in other words, her henchwomen, right? Yeah. Concessi or concessi et donavi, I granted and gave, ipsamque post modum donationem nostrum, and later our own donation.
Right.
Essensu atque interventu episcopi terra, by the assent and also intervention of the bishop in the area. Papa Innocentius secundus ipsis et earem de quacibus per privilegium in perpetuum corroboravit. Pope Innocent II confirmed it to them and to those following through, concerning the privilege in perpetuity.
Right, or I guess as a privilege, right, as a special.
Yeah, I was trying to how pair translated as a privilege.
Right.
I wanted to note a couple of things. I know you did, but donationem and privilegium, I don't know how they're going to necessarily what their meaning is going to be in a narrative, but in a legal document, those are generally specific legal terms. It means something very specific with specific privileges is basically a legal term for what kind of rights you've got to the property.
Right.
Usually described as a charter. A privilegium can also be a charter.
Cartes. Cartes. Yeah.
Right. So the point is, they got Abelard's decision to turn over the oratory to the nuns was confirmed in church law legally.
Yeah.
I had one teeny detail.
Okay.
Going back to ipsum oratorium cum omnibus ei pertinentibus. He handed over the oratory itself, surely, with all the things that were pertaining to it. In other words, whatever that would be, the tools in the tool shed.
That's also a legalistic phrase.
Right. Right.
It also means all rights.
Right.
So if it's in fact, most lands, any land worth anything has water rights.
That's true.
There's an irrigation canal, it's next to a river, stream, there's a well, there's something or other. And so they have that, and they also have ingress and egress. They can go in and out. So any paths or roads on the property, I'm not sure how big the property is, I'm not sure we know.
Right.
But yeah, it can include a whole lot.
Right. Good point.
And so to be clear there, that illis adductis is dative with concessi, right? So that's the henchwomen. So, and there I yielded and bequeathed or gave, or, legal language.
Right.
The oratory to those women having been led there.
Right. Good. All right. This is exciting. I'm glad we skipped the middle bit. I was kind of dreading that part. Although I enjoyed doing it at the time. But anyway, any questions, final thoughts? See you next week. Thanks, everybody.
You should go read.
I wanted to ask Mona. Oh, did she disappear already?
No, I'm here. I think I'm still here.
Mona, I wanted to ask, when you were in Brittany, did they speak Breton?
Yes, I heard it a couple of times, but not widespread. And there are signs and other things that were in Breton, with a course of French underneath it. So yeah, it's still among us.
Right.
Okay, I was just wondering, because when I was in Catalonia, when I went there, like the Lonely Planet kept saying, "Oh, they all speak Spanish. You're fine." Blah 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 blah. And I quickly found out that outside of Barcelona, that's a load of tutu.
I think
they all speak Catalan, and a lot of them don't speak anything else.
Right. All right.
So,
I
was just curious.
On that sectional note, or whatever national note, I'll see you guys if you're around next Tuesday. Have a lovely week.
You too. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.